Week 16 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few wide receivers I looked at off the wire this week. The first receiver, Jaden Reed of the Green Bay Packers. So Christian Watson, he hurt his shoulder in that game. He didn't come back, obviously. And Jaden Reed, he's been back over the last couple of weeks here. And last season, he pretty much was operating as the number one wideout. He's out there in 59% of fantasy leagues. Week 14 versus the Bears, 2 carries, 22 yards, 4 catches, 31 yards. In Week 15, in the tough loss at Denver, 5 catches, 55 yards on 6 targets. Week 16, a good matchup at the Bears. Give up the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. But Jaden Reed, he's the type of wide receiver that you could line him up anywhere in the formation. Him and Jordan Love have great rapport. And like I said, last season he was operating as the number one wideout. So this year we know he missed the majority of the season, where we only saw him week 1 and then returned week 14 and 15 is Jaden Reed. So this week at the Bears, decent matchup, and I think he's a good add off the wire this week. The next receiver, Darius Slayton of the New York Giants. So Slayton, he's the number 2 option in this passing game behind Wan'Dale Robinson, and he's coming off a good game, even though Jackson Dart once again in concussion protocol, and I'm assuming Jameis Winston will start the ball game, even though it is a tougher matchup in Week 16 versus the Minnesota Vikings. So Week 12 at Detroit, a catch, 23 yards. Week 13 at the Pats, 2 catches, 41 yards, a touchdown, 2-point conversion. And Week 15 versus the Commanders, 4 catches, 53 yards on a nice targets of 10 in that ball game. So like I said, it is a tough matchup. Jackson Dart possibly could be out with the concussion in this one. But with Winston in there, we know he's the ultimate gunslinger, and he does push that football down the field. So if you need a wide out in deeper leagues, I think Slayton's a decent ad out there in 51% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Luther Burden III of the Chicago Bears. I know Luther Burden left the ball game with an ankle injury, but he had more receiving yards than DJ Moore, even though DJ Moore found the end zone twice in the blowout victory versus the Cleveland Browns. So the last few games, he's definitely into the playbook more, is Luther Burden. But we'll see now if he's good to go with that ankle or if he's going to be out for a few weeks. Week 13 at Philly, carry 3 yards, 4 catches, 33 yards. Week 14 at Green Bay, carry 3 yards, 4 catches, 67 yards. And Week 15 versus Cleveland, 6 catches, 84 yards in that one. So this week, not a great matchup versus the Green Bay Packers, even though we just saw the Denver Broncos go up and down the field versus defense. But like I said, Roma Dunze, he got scratched in warm-ups right before the game, where Luther Burden then stepped right in once again. Had a decent one before he went out with the ankle injury. So right now, he's out there in 83% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver, Jalen Coker of the Carolina Panthers. So Jalen Coker, he's been getting better over the last few games. We know he missed the majority of the season. We know he missed the first 2 months of the season as Coker, but now the last 3 out of 4 games, double-digit fantasy points. In Week 16, a good matchup coming up versus Tampa. Gives up the 13th most fantasy points to receivers on the season. Week 11 at Atlanta, 4 catches, 52 yards, a 2-point conversion. Week 12 at the Niners, 3 catches, 32 yards. And Week 13 versus the Rams, 4 catches, 74 yards, a touchdown. And then after the bye, Week 15 at New Orleans, 4 catches, 60 yards, a touchdown, and a fumble loss. At Coker, he can run the routes. He's a big target, especially in the red zone. And this Panther team, I know it was a tough loss, but Coker, besides the fumble, he was running crisp routes in that one and making plays. So right now, while he's out there in 95% of fantasy leagues, he's definitely an ad this week. The next receiver, David Sills, the 5th of the Atlanta Falcons. So he had a big target ball game in that one in the upset victory at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 15. So Drake London, he's been out for a few weeks now with the knee injury. I don't know if he's going to return this season with this Atlanta team. Obviously, they're not going to make the playoffs, and they're out of it at this point of the year. Probably want to tank and get a better pick as well. So the last few weeks here for Sills, 9 or more fantasy points in the last 3 out of 4 games. Week 12 at the Saints, 2 catches, 16 yards, a touchdown. Week 13 at the Jets, 2 catches, 15 yards, a touchdown. Week 14, 4 targets, had a goose egg. And Week 15 at Tampa, 10 targets, 6 catches, 78 yards. So Week 16, a good matchup at the Cardinals, a defense that can't stop anyone. And like I said, if Drake London's out, once again, Sills is going to be in that lineup for this Falcon team. And he's out there in 99% of fantasy leagues. And the final receiver, Tutu Atwell of the Los Angeles Rams. So Atwell, he's going to step in and be a big part of this offense, I think, now, at least in this week's ball game versus the Seattle Seahawks, where we know, obviously, Devontae Adams, most likely he's going to be out where he aggravated that hamstring once again. So Atwell, It's been a quiet season for him, but like I said, last season he had some big ball games. And this year only 4 catches, 164 yards and a touchdown. So he's more of a sleeper option, I would say, is Otwell, but he's been a good deep ball threat in times when he's had opportunity with Matthew Stafford in there. So this week in the matchup, division matchup in Seattle, Thursday Night Football, usually high-scoring games. I think Otwell could be an all right ad with Adams out, and he's out there 99% of fantasy week. That's a few receivers I would add for week 16 of the fantasy football season.